A rich lady asked her domestic worker's African-American child to demonstrate chess as a form of mockery. She was unaware he possessed exceptional intellectual abilities. "Approach me, child. Show me your chess skills from the impoverished areas." Mrs. Victoria Wittman's voice resonated throughout the sitting room of her Beverly Hills residence, filled with the conceit typical of individuals who never struggled to achieve anything independently. Diego Santos, 17 years old, was supporting his mother Carmen by waiting on guests during a fundraising dinner when the millionaire chose to transform him into the evening's spectacle. The remaining attendees, entrepreneurs, legislators, and their companions snickered discreetly behind their costly crystal glasses. Victoria had organized the function to gather donations for underprivileged teenagers, though she clearly hadn't expected one of them to be serving hors d'oeuvres within her residence. The irony delighted her immensely. "I'm confident he can at minimum relocate the game pieces," Victoria persisted, indicating the Italian chess set adorning the center table. "It will be amusing observing what this youth accomplishes against someone who has genuinely mastered this activity." Mr. Hamilton, proprietor of 3 hospitality businesses, murmured to his partner, "I suspect he's ignorant that the night travels in L-shaped patterns." Merriment spread across the room like waves across a lake of condescension. Diego's mother Carmen averted her gaze and gripped the silver platter tightly. 20 years maintaining this household, raising her child independently on housekeeping wages, yet she still endured watching her employer exploit her son as amusement for impressing wealthy acquaintances. She had known Victoria since her younger days. She had witnessed the woman evolve from an indulged child into a merciless socialite over time. "Carmen, you may discontinue serving temporarily," Victoria instructed with feigned compassion. "I want you observing your son compete. This will prove enlightening for both parties." Diego, however, remained stationary for several seconds, his dark gaze studying not merely the gaming board, but every countenance within the room. At 17, he had already understood that silence frequently reveals more about individuals than countless conversations. And during that moment, what he perceived was a gathering of privileged adults completely ignorant of whom they were confronting. Something about Diego's demeanor caused several guests to stop their laughter. And peculiar tranquility, resembling the stillness preceding a hurricane. His digits moved unconsciously, as if visualizing strategies on an invisible board. "Absolutely, Mrs. Wittman," Diego responded with a serenity that prompted several attendees to exchange fascinated glances. "It shall be my privilege." Victoria grinned with satisfaction, settling into the leather seat like royalty preparing to observe combat. "Splendid. I'm certain you've never competed on equipment like this, have you? Genuine Italian stone, every piece valued beyond, well, you comprehend." State Representative Jennifer Mills, positioned near the window, spoke audibly. "Victoria, are you confident this isn't harsh? The unfortunate child will face embarrassment." "Absurd," Victoria countered, adjusting her diamond jewelry. "It represents a learning experience. He'll inform his peers he competed chess within an authentic mansion." What Victoria Wittman remained ignorant of and would learn through the most humiliating method possible was that this impoverished neighborhood youth had dedicated the past 8 years studying every opening strategy, every tactical approach, every snare the grandmasters had ever developed. While his peers engaged with video entertainment, Diego consumed chess literature obtained from the public library and observed historic competitions on the damaged computer he had successfully repaired personally. During the quiet pre-dawn hours, when Carmen labored additional shifts cleaning, Diego analyzed matches by Kasparov, Fischer, and Carlsen. He had committed over 200 different opening sequences to memory, and could recite the 50 most renowned defensive strategies in chess history verbatim. Most importantly, she remained completely unaware that she was about to face humiliation from the identical youth she had dismissed through pure prejudice before all her powerful associates. When the truth emerged, it wouldn't merely be a chess defeat. It would become a lesson she would carry throughout her remaining years. While Victoria positioned the pieces with theatrical gestures, Diego observed each guest. Something within his expression suggested he wasn't simply preparing for a game. He was preparing to transform every assumption within that room regarding who truly earned respect. If this narrative of discrimination and triumph over hardship has moved you, remember to subscribe to the channel because what transpired next demonstrated that judging individuals by appearance can become the most expensive error someone makes during their lifetime. Victoria assumed her position controlling the white pieces with the confidence of someone who had never experienced significant loss. "I always control white, dear. It's a family custom," she declared, completely disregarding that in competitive chess, piece color gets determined through random selection. Diego acknowledged quietly and arranged his black pieces with precision that made Mr. Hamilton grimace. Every piece was positioned exactly at the center of its square, perfectly aligned, as though that Italian marble board was merely one of hundreds he had experienced previously. "Let's make this intriguing," Victoria announced to the guests. "If the youth manages to provide me even slight concern, I'll donate $1,000 to perhaps some public educational institution." Laughter filled the room again, though this time Diego raised his head and smiled. A smile that failed to reach his eyes. Carmen felt a shiver travel down her spine. She recognized that expression. It was identical to Diego's childhood look whenever someone underestimated him during academic competitions. The same expression he displayed at 12 when declaring he no longer needed assistance with mathematics homework. Victoria initiated the game with a cautious pawn advancement. E4. "King's pawn, dear." "A classic opening we studied at Harvard," she explained condescendingly as if instructing a child in shoe tying. Diego responded immediately. C5. The Sicilian defense. An uncomfortable silence filled the space. That wasn't the move of someone who might understand piece movement. It was the response of someone who comprehended theory. "Intriguing," murmured Congresswoman Mills, leaning forward. Victoria hesitated 3 seconds, sufficient time for Diego to realize she had memorized 6 openings but didn't genuinely understand underlying principles. She played an F3, following a pattern probably learned at some social club. While Victoria considered her next move, Diego allowed himself a brief journey into memory. 8 years prior, when he was merely 9, he had discovered a torn chess book among library discards. He had carried it home concealed in his backpack and asked Carmen to teach basic rules. "Son, why do you wish to learn that?" his mother had inquired, exhausted following a double cleaning shift. "To resemble the wealthy children, Mom, they constantly claim superior intelligence." During that period, Carmen earned merely $600 monthly. No money existed for lessons, computers, or anything. However, the public library existed, becoming Diego's second home. Daily after school, he walked 3 kilometers to study historical games and dusty volumes nobody else touched. Victoria finally played D3, a timid move revealing her conservative nature in chess and life. She preferred safe, controlled positions where social status could guarantee victory. Diego responded with NC6, developing purposefully. Each move was executed under 5 seconds, as if following a mental script memorized years earlier. "Our little fellow is moving too rapidly," Victoria commented to guests. "In genuine chess, you contemplate before playing." Then Diego made his first psychological move. He paused, pretended deep thought for 15 seconds, and played G6, preparing the bishop's development. It was a move any novice might make instinctively, yet actually part of a sophisticated strategic plan requiring 10 additional moves to reveal itself. "Ah, you observe." Victoria turned triumphantly toward guests. "He lacks contemplation patience." Typical behavior. However, Mr. Hamilton, who had played chess at university 40 years earlier, recognized the pattern. "Victoria, this youth is establishing an accelerated dragon." "A what?" she replied, annoyed at interruption during her superiority demonstration. "It's a Sicilian variation. Quite sophisticated." Victoria examined the board with fresh tension in her posture. Nonsense. He must have observed it in cinema. Yet as moves progressed, something disturbing began forming. Diego wasn't merely responding to her moves. He was controlling the game's rhythm. Every piece he developed occupied precisely the correct square, creating harmony that transformed the board into something resembling a visual symphony. Carmen watched from the room's corner, heart racing. She knew Diego was skilled, yet had never witnessed him compete against someone who considered themselves so seriously. For the first time in 20 years working in that house, she witnessed fear in Victoria Wittman's eyes. Fear of discovering that perhaps, possibly, she wasn't as exceptional as she had always believed. Each fresh humiliation Victoria attempted to impose only nourished something within Diego she couldn't perceive. A quiet strength being fortified by the very injustice she was trying to inflict. What those privileged individuals didn't understand was that every contemptuous act was signing their own verdict written across the 64 squares of that board, which would soon become the stage for one of Beverly Hills' greatest social humiliations. Diego's 10th move revealed something that made Mr. Hamilton choke on his whiskey. The youth had sacrificed a pawn in a seemingly innocent move, yet any experienced player would recognize the lethal trap being constructed. "Victoria," Hamilton whispered urgently. "This youth is no amateur." However, Victoria was too determined proving her superiority to heed warnings. "Relax, dear. He must have memorized several moves from internet sources. I'll finish this within 5 minutes." That's when Diego did something unexpected. He calmly rose from his seat and approached Carmen, who was observing everything from the room's corner with clasped hands. "Mother," he said in a quiet voice that echoed through the tense room's silence. "Remember when you mentioned that someday I would show these people our true identity?" Carmen nodded, eyes glistening with tears. She remembered perfectly. It was Diego's 15th birthday, when she lacked money even for cake. He had found his mother weeping in their small house kitchen and promised that someday he would transform everything. "That youth possesses more class than all of us combined," Congresswoman Mills whispered to her husband, observing the mother-son interaction. Victoria tapped fingers impatiently on the table. "Can we continue the game? I have additional appointments today." Diego returned to the board, yet something had changed in his bearing. He was no longer the timid teenager invited for entertainment. He was a young man carrying years of sacrifice, secret studies, and determination forged through adversity on his shoulders. Diego's 11th move was executed with surgical precision that made Victoria frown initially. He had created dual threats. If she protected the king, she would lose her queen. If she protected the queen, she would face checkmate in 3 moves. "That's impossible," Victoria muttered, studying the board intently for the first time since the match began. That's when Hamilton realized something crucial. "Victoria, you're being outmaneuvered by a child who's probably never entered a formal chess club in his life." While Victoria attempted finding escape from her predicament, Diego took opportunity to observe every face in the room. Congresswoman Mills had stopped drinking champagne and was leaning forward, fascinated. The hotel chain owner had set aside his cellular phone. Even Hamilton's wife, who had been browsing a fashion magazine, now gave complete attention to the match. Carmen recognized that expression on her son's face. It was identical to his look at 12 when discovering the chess section at the public library. The same expression he maintained for 5 straight hours studying historical games on a slow, broken computer. The same expression that made him wake at 5 a.m. to solve tactical problems before attending school. Victoria finally made a move, a desperate attempt escaping the trap. Yet it was too late. Diego had calculated that possibility 6 moves previously. "Check," he stated simply, moving his queen to a position offering 3 different winning continuations. The room's silence was overwhelming. Victoria examined the board, then Diego, then back to the board. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from contained rage at realizing she was being systematically destroyed by someone she considered inferior. "You must have observed that sequence somewhere," she said, her voice higher than usual. "Nobody learns that independently." Diego smiled for the first time since the match began. "You're correct, ma'am. I learned it from Garry Kasparov." "Kasparov taught you?" Hamilton asked incredulously. "Not personally," Diego replied, moving a piece to what was clearly the final move. "However, I studied all his documented games. 1833 precisely. He employed this particular sequence against Karpov in 1984, Game 23 of the World Championship. Victoria looked around the room, seeking guest support. Yet what she found was something she had never experienced directed toward her: silent disapproval. For the first time in her life, surrounding people weren't impressed by her performance. Carmen stepped forward, her voice firm and clear. My son woke daily at 5 a.m. to study before school. He walked 6 kilometers to the public library because we couldn't afford internet. When I worked double shifts, he stayed awake all night solving chess problems by candlelight because our electricity was disconnected. The room was completely silent now. Diego looked at his mother with a mixture of love and determination that made some present look away, ashamed. Checkmate, Diego said softly, placing his queen in the final position. Victoria stared at the board for a long moment, as if expecting pieces to change positions independently. When she finally looked up, she found Diego observing her with the same unruffled calm he had shown initially. Yet now something had completely changed in the room's dynamics. Guests no longer viewed Diego as entertainment. They saw him as someone who had just rewritten all their assumptions about talent, class, and merit. They looked at Victoria with a mixture of embarrassment and disappointment she had never experienced previously. What Victoria Wittman didn't yet understand was that this board defeat would be merely the first move in a much larger game about to begin. A game where all social rules she had always taken for granted would be questioned, and where the youth she had underestimated would prove that genuine nobility has nothing to do with surnames or bank accounts. Victoria stared at the board for 15 seconds that seemed eternal. Her trembling fingers touched the fallen king as if they could magically reverse the checkmate. The room's silence was so thick you could hear the $15,000 wall clock ticking. That was luck, she muttered, her voice trembling. All previous confidence vanished. He must have memorized that specific sequence somewhere. Hamilton rose from his chair and approached the board. Victoria, that youth just executed a Sicilian variation even I didn't know, and I'd been playing this game 40 years. Congresswoman Mills retrieved her cellular phone and began recording discreetly. As an experienced politician, she immediately recognized this moment's viral potential. A racist millionaire being humiliated by a prodigy she had underestimated. I don't accept that, Victoria said, standing abruptly and knocking over several pieces. Something's wrong here. Nobody learns to play like that alone. Someone trained him specifically to humiliate me. Diego remained seated, observing her with the same unruffled calm. Would you prefer a rematch? I can play anyone here, or all of them simultaneously if you'd like. The comment caused nervous murmuring among guests. It was an offer that sounded impossible. Yet after what they had just witnessed, nobody dared doubt him. You're being arrogant now, Victoria retorted, her face red with anger and humiliation. A youth from the slums doesn't address his superiors that way. That's when Carmen stepped forward and for the first time in 20 years, looked Victoria Wittman directly in the eye without lowering her head. Mrs. Wittman, Carmen said, her voice firm and clear. My son isn't from the slums. We're from a working-class community. And he isn't being arrogant. He's being honest about his abilities. Something you clearly cannot do about yours. The room's tension rose exponentially. Some guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, realizing they were witnessing something much larger than a simple chess match. Victoria turned to Carmen with fury. How dare you speak to me that way? Have you forgotten your place in this house? No, Carmen replied calmly. I remembered my worth. Hamilton intervened, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation's direction. Victoria, perhaps we should recognize that the young man is truly gifted and talented. Victoria laughed bitterly. Don't you understand? This was orchestrated. Someone trained him specifically to make me appear foolish in my own home. Diego finally stood up, and when he spoke, his voice carried a maturity that silenced all adults present. Mrs. Wittman, do you want to know the truth? I wasn't trained to humiliate you. I spent the past 8 years studying chess because I dreamed of playing against people who respected the game. People who understood that talent has no color, social class, or surname. He paused, looking at each person present. When you invited me to play how you play in the slums, I thought I would finally have a chance to show that I deserved respect. Yet now I realize that you never wanted a fair match. You wanted a humiliation show." Congresswoman Mills had stopped recording and watched the scene with fascination. "How old are you, child?" 17, Diego replied. "And how long have you been playing?" "Seriously?" 8 years. Mills looked at Victoria with an expression mixing disbelief and disapproval. "Victoria, you've just been defeated by a self-taught teenager. A teenager whose family you employ. A teenager you invited to play as entertainment." Victoria felt the weight of every gaze in the room. For the first time in her life, they weren't looks of admiration or envy. They were looks of judgment. "I didn't know he played seriously," she tried defending herself. Yet her voice sounded weak, even to her own ears. "The question isn't whether he played seriously," Hamilton said, clearly irritated. "The question is that you invited him to play, assuming he would be easily defeated. Why? Because he's your maid's son? Because he's black? Because he doesn't have money?" The silence that followed was devastating. Diego calmly arranged the pieces on the board, each move executed with precision. "Thank you for the game, Ms. Wittman. It was educational." When he finished, he turned to his mother. "Mom, can we go? I have school tomorrow." Carmen nodded, removing the apron she had worn to serve guests. Yet before leaving, she turned to Victoria one final time. "Mrs. Wittman, thank you for showing me that my son deserves to be in much better places than this." As mother and son walked toward the door, Congresswoman Mills called out, "Diego, are you interested in scholarships? I know some universities that would love to have someone with your talent." Diego stopped and smiled, his first genuine smile of the night. "Very interested, ma'am." Mills handed him her card. "Call me Monday." Victoria observed motionless, still processing how she had lost complete control of the situation in under an hour. She had gone from respected hostess to the woman who had underestimated a prodigy out of prejudice before important witnesses. When the door closed behind Diego and Carmen, the remaining guests looked at each other in awkward silence. Hamilton was the first to stand up. "I think I'd better leave, too." One by one, guests began departing, offering only cold farewells and disapproving glances. Victoria was left alone in the room, still staring at the board where her arrogance had been systematically destroyed by a teenager she considered inferior. Yet what she didn't know was that tonight would be just the first move in a much bigger game. One where Diego Santos would rewrite not only his own history, but question the entire privilege system that people like Victoria Wittman took for granted. As Diego walked home with his mother under the Beverly Hills stars, he carried in his pocket the card that would change his life forever. In his mind, he was already calculating not just chess moves, but moves in a much bigger game. The game of proving that true nobility cannot be purchased with money but is earned through character. 6 months afterward, Diego Santos walked through Stanford University halls with a full scholarship to study engineering. Congresswoman Mills had kept her promise, connecting him not only with academic opportunities, but with an entire world of people who recognize talent regardless of social background. The video of that Beverly Hills night had gone viral, 3 million views in 2 weeks. Not because someone had recorded the match, but because Congresswoman Mills herself had shared the story on her social media, transforming Diego into a symbol of overcoming adversity and Victoria into an example of what not to do when possessing privilege. "Young Prodigy Destroys Prejudiced Millionaire in Chess" was the headline that circulated throughout the internet. The comments were relentless. "What a shame for that woman, and that boy deserves every opportunity in the world," dominated the response sections. Victoria Wittman had become persona non grata in her own social circles. The golf club cancelled her membership after pressure from other members. 3 charities removed her name from events. Even Hamilton, her friend of decades, began avoiding her at social gatherings. "Victoria has always been arrogant, yet I never imagined she could be so cruel," Hamilton's wife commented during a Malibu dinner. "To humiliate a child like that before everyone." The worst part for Victoria was realizing that Diego had never sought revenge or exposure. He had simply played chess, something he did naturally, with mastery developed through years of quiet dedication. The humiliation she felt was self-inflicted, a direct result of her own prejudiced assumptions. Carmen had been promoted to cleaning supervisor at a 5-star Santa Monica hotel, a job paying 3 times as much and including full medical benefits. It wasn't charity. It was recognition of the professionalism she had always demonstrated, now finally valued by employers who saw beyond prejudice. Diego founded a free online chess program connecting young people from underserved communities with college mentors. In under 6 months, 1,200 children were learning not just how to move pieces, but life strategies that no formal classroom could teach. Chess taught me that every person has unique strategic value, Diego explained during a CNN interview. Victoria Wittman taught me that some people need to lose everything to learn what really matters. When asked if he held a grudge against the woman who tried to humiliate him, Diego smiled with the same calm he had shown on that fateful night. Grudges are pieces that only obstruct the game. I prefer focusing on what I can build. Victoria watched that interview alone in her mansion, now empty of friends who had abandoned her. For the first time, she truly understood what she had lost that night. Not just a chess match, but the opportunity to be a better person. Hamilton called once after the incident just to say, "Victoria, you created that situation." Diego just responded with class you should have shown from the beginning. The lesson echoed beyond Beverly Hills. Diego proved that true nobility doesn't come from surnames or bank accounts, but from character forged in adversity and demonstrated through actions. He transformed prejudice into purpose, others' humiliation into his own growth. Today, when Diego looks to the future, he sees no limitations imposed by others, but possibilities created by his own determination. Victoria had tried to diminish him to make herself feel bigger, yet she ended up revealing that true greatness is measured by the ability to lift others up, not tear them down. Carmen proudly framed a photo of Diego receiving his first academic honorable mention at Stanford. On the wall beside it, a certificate from the chess program that had already impacted thousands of young people. Achievements that no money could buy and no prejudice could steal. The best revenge, as Diego discovered, is not to destroy those who try to diminish you. It is to build something so extraordinary that their mediocrity becomes irrelevant by comparison. Victoria Wittman tried to make him entertainment, yet Diego Santos became inspiration. That difference defines not only who wins at chess, but who wins in life. If this story of overcoming adversity and justice touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that true power doesn't lie in having privileges, but in transforming obstacles into opportunities for extraordinary growth.